Town of Rockland Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, February 7th, 2023. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Tiffany, can you start us off?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be advised that this open meeting is being broadcast live and recorded for playback by WRPS at youtube.com/WRPS-Rockland. Please go to WRPSRockland.com for further information. Next on the agenda, community announcements. Doug?
Thanks, Mike. I have two announcements tonight. The first is the annual Boston Bruins PJ Drive, the Pajama Drive. It's going to be at the Rockland Memorial Library. Donations of new pajamas are greatly appreciated. And there will be a celebration on Thursday, February 23rd at 2:30 p.m. at the library. And big news, Blades, the team mascot for the Boston Bruins, will be there to lead children in activities, crafts, trivia, pictures, games, and more. So that's a cool event. And again, donate pajamas for needy families at the library. And then next is the Rockland High School is doing a blood drive on February 10th from 8:30 to 1:30 in the back gym. And if there's any questions or need for contact information, Mrs. Pang can be reached at 781-871-8411. Again, blood drive, February 10th, 8:30 to 1:30. That's it.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Next on the agenda, under minutes. Minutes from January 17, 2023.
Motion to approve the minutes of January 17th, 2023.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda, under new business, a request for new Class 1 license, Land Rover, 1022 Hingham Street. Anybody here from Land Rover? Come on up. Just have a seat right at the microphone. Introduce yourself.
I'm Rob Kelleher, Land Rover Hanover General Manager.
Okay. So what do you guys, tell us a little bit about the application itself, where the specific building is.
So it's the old Prime Hyundai building that was occupied by Prime Hyundai. It's 1022 Rockland, or 1022 Hingham Street, Rockland.
So that building will no longer be vacant if we grant the license here for Land Rover?
Right.
Okay. All right, all the paperwork looks like it's in order. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the Class 1 license for Land Rover, 1022 Hingham Street.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? That's unanimous. You're all set?
Thank you, appreciate it.
Good luck.
Okay, next on the agenda, entertainment license request, Stevie G's Restaurant, 372 Market Street. Shannon, come on up.
Good evening, I'm Shannon Loconsola with Stevie G's Restaurant at 372 Market Street in Rockland. Hello.
So Shannon, obviously you guys have been open now, I think just over a year. What specifically are you looking to do with this license?
Yep, so we're looking to have live acoustic music on Sundays, like 10 to 1 during brunch, which is what we're currently hoping to do at the moment. And then eventually, if we do any pop-up, like open mic nights, or possibly, it's going well, maybe Saturdays too, but just to be able to allow local musicians to be able to come in and give a little bit of entertainment while people are having brunch.
Okay, anybody have any questions or comments for Shannon?
I just want to say congratulations on your success.
Thank you so
Nice to see a
much.
successful Rockland business. Every time I go in there, it's packed,
Thank
you
you.
know.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
That's all I wanted to
we're
say.
super excited, so thank you.
And I understand you recently had a one-year anniversary.
We did, February 2nd, yeah.
So Congratulations
Thank you
on
so
that,
much,
too.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the entertainment license for Stevie G's Restaurant, 372 Market Street.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion in 2 seconds. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, Town Clerk, State Votes Act requirements regarding assigning police officers to polling places. Ms. Liza,
Hi, guys, I'm back.
welcome back. How are you?
I'm well. So, as you know, I came before you back in August to ask you to approve the list of voters, election workers, and to approve that if need be, should anybody not be able to work for me, that I have the authority to appoint the people without having to come back to the board. I'm also here to ask that the new law also states that the Board of Selectmen is responsible for appointing the police officers, and I'm here to ask that you give that authority to the police chief.
Think we can trust him?
Verdict isn't,
Totally makes sense.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or concerns with that request? If not, then I'll entertain a motion. Actually, so the motion should be, per the Votes Act of 2022 as amended, which requires the Board of Selectmen to assign police officers to each polling location, we hereby designate that the Chief of Police has the authority to assign the specific police officers according to scheduling and availability. So I'll entertain that motion.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Also, per the Votes Act of 2022, the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint the people listed on the town clerk's list of proposed election workers, and we confirm by vote that if 3 weeks before an election there are still not enough poll workers appointed, the clerk will be able to fill the vacancies by appointing any competent person without regard to party, residence, or a list from a local party committee. I'll entertain that motion.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Motion and a second. All those in favor? That's unanimous.
all right?
Thank you, Liza.
All right, nice and easy. Thanks.
Liza, I tell you, you get better at that every time. Okay, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule.
If you want, Mike, I could start on the warrant articles, and then if I run out of time, I can...
Yeah,
pick it
you
up
think
after.
you could do that for about
Sure.
8 minutes or so?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll skip over the 7:15 public hearing until 7:15, and we'll go to May 1st, 2023 annual town meeting draft list of warrant articles and initial capital requests. The warrant closing on March 10th, 2023.
Thanks, Mike. Yep, and thanks for reading that. Warrant does close on March 10th unless it gets reopened by the board. So I just started, like I do every year, a preliminary running list of any potential town meeting warrant article items. I have them broken out a certain way because certain attorneys work on certain types of articles and different attorneys work on different ones. So in the end, it'll all be on the same warrant. So maybe I'll just sort of kind of quickly run down them, and if there's a couple that I think we might want to focus on a little bit, I'll pause for that. So obviously, we have the budget, we have our capital articles, we'll have any Community Preservation Act articles. Number 4, and again, these numbers are in no priority, it was literally just as I thought of them. Number 4 would be a new one, as we discussed before, now that we're getting some opioid settlement funds, I'm recommending that we create a special purpose stabilization fund, so those funds will get segregated, and then we can make recommendations to town meeting how to appropriate it out specifically for substance abuse prevention or treatment-related services. Number 5 would be basically paying for prior year bills. There's other examples besides the one I had in there, but it's a common thing that if bills come in late, can't pay a prior year bill unless we do it at a special town meeting. Number 6 would be the water department has requested a bylaw to enable them to enforce water restrictions. I think it's something that they have in place in Abington, but they don't have in place via a bylaw here in Rockland. So that's at their request, and I'll get more information from the Waterworks on that. Number 7, I'm not sure if we'll need to do. It was something that was brought up during police negotiations, which is establishing a police detail revolving fund for private details. When there's a detail that the town pays, we pay all our bills very timely. When there's private details, say utilities like National Grid or Comcast or Verizon, sometimes it can take a couple months for those to get paid. So the union asked about creating a revolving fund so that there's money in already and it can just quickly be paid out. So it's very easy to create a revolving fund like that, but the problem is where does the money come from to front load it in the beginning? And it's not really appropriate for it to be taxpayer funds, because these are private details paid by private companies. So I don't really know if we're going to do this in the end, but I do have it as a placeholder. Number 8 was recommended by the Animal Control Officer, an update to our dog kennel bylaw. Number 9 involves the Rent Control Board, and this is something that is sort of still under consideration. I think it's fair to say that the current rent control bylaw is not working ideally. There's litigation outstanding now. I don't think any party, I don't think anyone on any side of the areas that are subject to rent control are happy with how things are working. So I'm not convinced we'll actually have time to thoughtfully come up with an update or a solution, but it's something that we've talked about a bit, and so I have it on the list for now.
And let's just, point out real quickly that is resident-driven. That wasn't something that we as a board or you
That's
or
right.
anybody else
It
came
was
up with.
requested.
It was a request by the residents in
Right.
town. that
And it
this
only
traffic
applies in
lights-
the mobile home parks. One of the concerns that we have is when it was initially approved by town meeting voters, the assumption and the promise was that it wasn't going to cost the taxpayers anything to do this. It would be a way to help those residents living in those mobile homes, but in fact, it's actually costing the town and taxpayers a lot of money in legal fees. As I said, there's litigation, there's been a lot of issues going back and forth, so it is actually costing taxpayers funding. So I think something does need to be done, but we just want to make sure to take our time, do it right, and engage with all the stakeholders. Next is just authorizing a multi-year lease for some equipment at the library. Number 11 is at the request of the fire chief, would adopt a Mass General law requiring sprinklers in lodging houses. That's obviously a life safety issue. We talked previously about accepting, number 12 is related to accepting the Mount Pleasant Cemetery, and assuming that goes through, we would add them to the list of revolving funds. Number 13 also relates to revolving funds, increase the funding cap for Rockland Day. And number 14 is a good thing, but it's kind of a big issue, and there'll be a whole separate presentation on this on March 7th at your meeting. Relates to the South Shore Regional Technical School. The regional agreement needs to be updated. They're going to bring in Marshfield, which will be a good thing, financially at least, because with another relatively large town coming in, that's going to spread those costs out more, and we should hopefully see a decrease in our assessment to the school. So again, Tom Hickey, the superintendent, will come in on March 7th to give us more of an update on that. So then my next category relates more specifically to land use. There's a property that is under consideration. We're talking tonight in executive session about potentially acquiring, so I threw that on the list. As again, we've talked before, and I mentioned up above with the revolving fund, we do need to request town meeting authorize us to accept the Mount Pleasant Cemetery, since the current cemetery owners are no longer willing or able to care for that anymore. So the town is the only one left to do it. Related to that would be establishing cemetery commissioners, and so we'll need to have some discussion about whether that would be something the Board of Selectmen would want to fill, a subset of the Board of Selectmen, or maybe you'd want to appoint other people in the community to that role. So maybe I'd ask that you all think about that. Mm-hmm. It's done differently in different communities. Sometimes it's the board, sometimes it's a subcommittee, sometimes it's other people all together. I've mentioned before a potential bylaw cap on the number of marijuana dispensaries in town. So again, I know you guys have been thinking about that for a bit, but that's on my list until you guys say take it off. But if we do go forward with something like this, we'll have to decide exactly what the cap would be. Number 20 relates to a sewer bylaw update, which I'll touch on again when I get down to the sewer articles down below. Number 21 is for the highway superintendent. This would authorize the selectmen to adopt highway regulations pursuant to Mass General Law section, actually to adopt highway regulations in our general bylaws, section 342. So we've had some issues with developers who have balked at the highway superintendent's long-standing policy on impact fees for developments when they come in, things to make sure improvements are made to road, infrastructure, sidewalks, that type of thing. But more recently, there have been some developers that say, point me to the regulation that says I have to pay that. I don't care if that's your past practice and that's what everybody else does. So this would be essentially just codifying what's reasonable and what we've been doing for a number of years. So with that, it's 7:15, and I'll pause there and pick up the rest after the hearing.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to enter into our 7:15 public hearing, National Grid poll request for poll number 4-84 Lancaster Street.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll go roll call, all in favor? Selectman Childs?
Yes.
Selectman Shortall?
Yes.
Selectman Needham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Nyman?
Yes.
And myself. Okay, public hearing is officially open. Doug?
Yep, so this is kind of standard. We have a request in your packet signed by National Grid and Verizon to locate a pole. You'll see a map. It's on the corner of Lancaster and Florence Street. It was advertised appropriately. Abutters were notified. My understanding is all the various departments are in support, so there should be somebody from the utility here, I imagine, to speak to it, and I'd ask him to come up.
You want to come up? Sure. Just introduce yourself, tell us what you
My
do
name
for
is,
National
I'm
Grid.
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Just introduce yourself, tell us what you do for National Grid.
Yes, my name is Socrates Perez. My address is 100 East Ashland Street in Brockton. I'm one of the engineers of National Grid. We are requesting a permission for a new pole near 31 Lancaster Street. Existing is a tree with a guy wire. I believe the tree is going to be removed. We got a request to basically make it in kind, so we just need a new pole so we can use the guy wire for it.
Okay. Any questions from members of the board?
I see there's some abutters in the audience. Should we entertain them?
Yeah, I figured I'd let you guys have any
Oh, okay.
questions first, and then I'd go to any abutters. Okay. So any abutters to this property that would like to speak? Would you like to speak, just here in support?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the residents that are directly affected, obviously they're not here, but 31 Lancaster Street, has anybody spoken to them directly in regards to this? They're on board with the tree coming down and the pole going up?
I believe so.
Okay. Okay. Okay, if nobody has any other questions for Socrates, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this portion of the public hearing. Anybody in the audience have any other questions in regards to this issue? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this portion of the public hearing.
So moved.
I got a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, roll call vote. Selectperson Childs?
Yes.
Selectperson Shortall?
Yes.
Selectperson Needham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Nyman?
Yes.
And myself. Okay, public hearing is now adjourned. So what is the will of the board? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve poll number 4-84 Lancaster Street.
Okay, I've got a motion, do I have a second? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Okay, all set, thank you much. Okay, next on the agenda, we'll go back to where Doug left off. We just get into number 21 was the last one you did, I think?
Yep, I think we're on 22. So there needs to be some clarification to our stormwater regulations. The details of that we're still fleshing out with Dave Taylor and council. Number 23 would relate to a zoning bylaw to allow cat shelters. That's actually something that's come up that needs to be addressed in our zoning bylaws. Number 24 is something the building inspector recommended. That would be a new bylaw addressing short-term rentals or Airbnbs. So that would be something I guess I'd ask you just to think about, not for any particular comment now, because we should probably hear from the building inspector, but I think what he's getting at is what happens in a lot of communities where, people buy a home, you're in a quiet cul-de-sac, you have a certain expectation, and the next thing you know, your house next door is operating like a motel, and there's constant turnover with renters. And maybe that's something that's appropriate, because people's living situations, necessitate it, or maybe there needs to be a little bit of control over where, how long. Different communities will structure it differently depending on length of stay, things like that. So we can get a recommendation from Tom, but that's I think I imagine this is driven by complaints that he may get, but yet there's no bylaw that he's able to enforce, so we should have some rules around it. The next several articles deal with the sewer department, and this is not an exhaustive list because there's, some of these could really be considered capital, which I mentioned broadly above for number 2. But there's, again, number 25 deals with repairs at the Spruce Station. There would be some additional funding to replace system pumps and injector stations. Number 7 would authorize additional funding for the digester boiler. If you recall, we authorized ARPA funding for the digester boiler. I think we authorized $515,000 for that. Apparently, the cost is going to exceed that. I think they may have an older article that was unspent that I think they might want to reappropriate for this purpose. So I added in here, if you recall, our remaining ARPA funds are coming through Plymouth County, and if you remember, while it's not required by federal law, not required by state law, the county is taking the position that if we mix ARPA funds with any other type of funding, we have to have a separate town meeting vote for that. So given that we have to go to town meeting anyways to reappropriate that old article, we might as well just add in that we're commingling with ARPA funds. Number 28, this relates to that article I noted above, number 20, which is to change what had been a town meeting sewer use ordinance and essentially authorize the sewer commissioners to adopt rules and regulations. So this, I think, is a good idea because it would give a little bit more flexibility to the sewer commissioners to be able to adopt rules and regulations as they need to and not have to wait once a year for an annual town meeting. Number 29, this relates to authorizing debt, and I'll get to this a little bit later in the agenda when I talk about our capital projects for the sewer department for a tertiary phosphorus system. And then number 30 relates to what I just said a moment ago, which would authorize commingling ARPA funds with other fees generated by the sewer department to be able to fund that. This is something that I have on the list because I try to have my town meeting warrant article list just be proactive about anything that might come up, but the sewer commissioners have not come in to request this yet, so this still needs to be presented, and you guys still need to decide if this is something you want to do. But again, my biggest fear is that I'm going to miss an article, so anything that might come up, I put it on the list. I've shared this with other department heads and other departments, so I don't think I'm missing anything yet. So I think from a policy perspective, again, we'll come back to the sewer, ARPA, and borrowing, but I think some of the things I'd ask you to continue thinking about, maybe we can discuss at our next meeting, would be a cap on the marijuana dispensaries. I'll report back with a little bit more info on rent control, and we'll get some more information on all the various bylaw or zoning updates, whether it's Airbnb, dogs, cat shelters, things like that. So hopefully that made sense. I don't know if you have any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a
Go ahead.
question.
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to me, but since there are 4 women on this board, can we put on the warrant that we can vote to change the name to Select Board rather than Board of Selectmen?
So I guess my only question there would be process, because you have appointed a charter review committee, so that's what they're doing, is making recommendations for updating the charter. And I did make that point at their first meeting. I strongly suggested that that should be one of their recommendations. Obviously, the warrant is under your control, so you can absolutely put that on the warrant if you want. I would just maybe ask you to think about how that fits within the mission of the Charter Review Committee, and if you want to do it without going through that.
Would their recommendation come this year or 24?
My sense is, given their schedule, kind of like once-a-month meetings at the end of the month, that there probably won't be any recommendations for this annual town meeting.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's absolutely in your purview, but it's just a matter of if you want to wait for them or
Chat with
not.
them maybe about it. Also, the piping for the digester boiler, wasn't there something earmarked already for that out of ARPA funds?
Yes, so again, we did, for the digester boiler in total was $515,000. Right, so I believe what they're saying is that they think the total cost is going to exceed the $515,000, and that there is an article from a prior year's town meeting for infrastructure improvements at the plant where there's still some available left over that they would want to reappropriate for this purpose. That's my understanding, but I think when the sewer commissioners come in, they can lay all that out. I don't want to speak for them.
My last question regarding the whole sewer section, has any of this been put on the capital plan yet?
I think some of the, I'd have to check.
Okay.
I know, the big massive plant, total reconstruction is not on the capital plan. I know some of the smaller things, like I think the digester boiler is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the tertiary phosphorus system, so that would have to be looked at.
Well, that seems to make, the tertiary system seems to make a lot of sense, because it'll really help us meet the EPA compliance order deadline for the,
And the capital planning committee is meeting regularly, and I know they're reaching out to each department
Yeah.
to meet, so I'm sure if it's not
Okay.
on the capital plan, it will be
Okay.
addressed.
all right. That's it.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions? Okay, thank you, Doug. Next on the agenda, other new business not reasonably anticipated. Doug?
I have none.
Okay. Next, old business, status of pending major capital projects. Doug?
Great, and I just realized I left the keyboard over there, so I'm just going to grab that. So I only have one slide to show tonight, but I just thought a picture would be helpful, especially for residents in the community. I know the board is very familiar with this stuff. So the reason why I wanted to put this on the agenda and just briefly discuss this tonight is because I've heard some feedback from some folks in the community, be it at, general committee meetings or outreach sessions where we're talking about different projects, or just, other random times. Why aren't we talking to each other? Why aren't we coordinating between departments? We might talk about one project one time. What about all the other things you're asking? So I thought it'd be helpful to put all the big things on one piece of paper and just briefly go over it for the community so they can understand what our thinking is and what our approach is. The layout of where they lie on the screen is not really relevant. I just wanted to make it fit. So I'll start with water. So, we all know that we have issues with PFAS in our water. It's not unique to Rockland. It's an issue all over the state. It's an issue all over the country. But it is being addressed. And if you remember, town meeting voted authorization to borrow up to $13 million with an equal match of $13 million from the town of Abington. So a total of $26 million has been authorized to be borrowed by the Joint Water Works to address PFAS and other water quality issues. The Water Department and their engineers are working very closely with the State Revolving Fund, the Clean Water Trust, which is where you get the very best possible financing, sometimes even a little bit of loan forgiveness. So that project, again, can't really be commingled with other projects because we have a joint waterworks with Abington, and they're already, in one sense, kind of ahead of the game in that they have some things engineered, they have a funding stream that's been authorized, so they're moving forward. With sewer, there's a lot going on, and we've been talking about this for a while, and it's very complicated, but needless to say, one of the things that I've been talking with the sewer commissioners about, as well as Lori and others, is sort of a big number of, I'll just throw out a number, $80 million, which is a number that's been thrown around, I don't think is realistic to be funded all at once. Because again, sewer is an enterprise fund. Before it was an enterprise fund, it was a special revenue fund, which just means it's self-supporting. It's its own little mini business. Its revenues have to pay for its expenses. So the debt service on an $80 million project funded all at once is just not realistic. The debt service, depending on if they went through the state revolving fund or not, would be somewhere to $4.5 to $5.5 million per year on top of all their other existing expenses. So we've met with the sewer commissioners, and they understand that, and they're looking at ways to break this up into phases, because we all agree we have to get into compliance with the Clean Water Act and the EPA administrative order. We know that. Nobody's arguing with that. It's just what's the best way to get there. So they're working hard with their engineers to break it up into phases. One of the things that I alluded to earlier on the town meeting warrant article list was an initial request for $4 million in FY24 to deal with some of this phosphorus tertiary treatment. In meeting with the sewer commissioners, they actually think that $2.5 million might be able to accomplish what they think needs to be designed to show progress that they need for the EPA. So at the meeting that I was at, I made it very clear this was just an idea I had, that I wasn't authorized to approve it, but I threw out the idea, since they don't have an extra $2.5 million in retained earnings, maybe we could use our last $1 million in ARPA funding, which would only leave $1.5 million left to fund, which they could then borrow, get authorization to borrow, again, with a debt service to be paid back by increases in their rates that they charge customers from sewer. So that's what's going on there with sewer. There's a lot of people working very hard on this, and we're trying to work very collaboratively with the sewer commissioners on that. Community center, we've had public presentations on that. The building is, completely beyond its useful life. The envelope, the interior systems, the furnishings, the fixtures, literally every part of that building. We have an ongoing feasibility study for a new building at Hartsef Park. It's in the very, very early stages, so we'll see where that takes us. Roads, that's something where, as I think everybody knows, once you do a road bond and fix your roads, it doesn't mean you're done, because you're never done with the roads. People drive on them, we throw salt on them, they freeze. So roads need to be continually reinvested in. So while the road bond has been fully spent, we're not done paying it off, but we are going to need to have another road bond at some point in the near future. We are and have been successful at seeking and receiving grants. As you know, we just received $1 million grant from Mass Works to fully design improvements to Hingham Street, which is greatly needed. We will likely apply for another grant in the future once the design is done for some construction. Our Highway Superintendent, Dave Taylor, has been working very hard on a TIP application, a Transportation Improvement Program through the State Department of Transportation, that would completely reconstruct all of VFW Drive from Union Street through Delahunt Drive intersection all the way up to the Hingham line, with curbing, sidewalks, infrastructure, landscaping, the whole 9 yards. It's like a $14 million program. So we're on the list. We're working hard to find other sources of funding from other developers to help us keep some of that design and engineering moving, because you can't just ask for $14 million without some skin in the game. So we're working on putting the skin in the game to try to leverage that. And then last but not least, the fire station, we've talked about that quite a bit. We've had a lot of public outreach on it. I want to highlight again on the fire department page of the town website, we have a whole tab on the left-hand side dedicated solely for this project. There's PowerPoint presentations, there's documents, there's several video links to interviews, public outreach sessions, the ZBA hearing where they ultimately granted the special permit for the use. So there's a lot going on there. We will have a formal presentation at your next meeting on the 21st, which will be our kind of final formal presentation to you to help set you up to be in a position to decide if you want to put it on the ballot in the town meeting warrant or not, because the 21st, your next meeting, is really the last meeting in time for the ballot for the election in April. And again, I should just say, all these things are interrelated in the sense that for us to generate more revenue, help our economy, right? We need growth, we need development, we need to, work with our 40R district to bring, and you can't do any of that stuff if you don't have water, if you don't have sewer, and if you have crumbling infrastructure around you. You can't be successful in any of those things. So I think, I know I've talked a lot, but I guess the main point I just wanted to make is that we are talking to each other, and we understand the interrelationship between these different things, but we can't just wait and bundle them all in one package, because they're all on different timelines and they all work with different funding streams. Some things are self-supporting, other things are not. So I know that was a lot. I hope that was helpful, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions on that if you have any.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Or, go ahead.
Okay, it's about the community center. Is Chipmunk still in that building?
They are, yes.
Okay, so, is that safe for them to be?
Yeah, I mean, if if anything ever gets to the point, and this has happened before, where there's an
Yeah.
unsafe condition, we will and have immediately removed anybody from any space that's unsafe. So anything that's happening in there now is safe, but part of the urgency in doing this feasibility study is, if you go into that building, you see us slowly kind of shrinking our footprint, because certain spaces, are becoming, outdated. So we keep a close eye on that, and we know our fire chief and our building inspector are looking at it, but we're doing the best we can, but there's going to come a point in time where it's just not sustainable.
Like crumbling infrastructure, is that?
Yeah, I mean, there's, slate tiles falling off the roof, bricks falling out. I mean, one of the biggest problems we have there is every time there's a leak, which is frequent, and we call a plumber, and they open up a piece of drywall to, replace a section, the pipe literally just crumbles, and it turns into like a massive repair job. That's just one example. The entire facility is just past its useful life.
Yeah, how many square feet is that building,
Off the top of my head,
No?
I don't know.
It's pretty huge.
It's 3 stories plus a basement, so
Yeah,
it's a large building.
okay.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions? Okay.
Mike, the one other thing I just thought I should mention, because I kind of skipped over it after the warrant articles, and I guess maybe we could do it under the budget, was the list of capital articles. So I wasn't sure if, I think I had it listed under the warrant, so maybe I'll just do that now.
Yeah, you can throw it in under the budget, that's fine, go ahead.
So I'm not going to go through and read every one of these, but this is a list, with the exception of those sewer articles, of every request that I've received. And you'll see I do have the new fire station on here, but I have it offset with a debt exclusion, so that's not contributing toward the bottom line. But if you, again, ignore water and sewer, because they're self-funded enterprise funds, the real takeaway here is the total capital requests is over $5.6 million. So we're obviously not going to be able to fund most of these articles. I should note that one of the articles, you'll notice the last one down there, the one school department article, is technically not a capital request. I threw it on here because we fund all this generally from free cash, so I think their request was generally a free cash request, but I put it on here just to have it all on one page. So the major categories of requests are the same: some administration, fire, highway, library, police, and the school department. One thing I did spend some time, though, on, which you'll see the column on the right, in response to this change in state law, which I know I've been incredibly redundant and boring with my repeated complaints about the state changing the law and the use of marijuana host community agreement funds. All that being said, in the past, I've wanted to be very careful and conservative in our use of these funds and not just spend it all at once, let it build up and save up for good, important needs. Now I'm of a different mind. Now, given that the state is talking about going back and nullifying our currently valid contracts with these dispensaries, I'm worried about them clawing back and taking some of our funding away. So I actually think we should spend what we have, before the state potentially takes it. So the use of marijuana host community agreement funds is supposed to be in some form tied to impacts on the community, impacts on local government. So it shouldn't really be used willy-nilly just for anything. So what I did was I pulled over a number of capital requests from departments and categories of things that I think we could make a reasonable argument that there's a relationship to businesses like dispensaries. So you can see there's a couple of fire vehicles, a grant match for the fire department to get a new engine, a number of articles for the highway department, both equipment, road improvement equipment, as well as actually temporarily repaving Weymouth Street, which, if you know Weymouth Street in front of Canavana, between Delahunt Drive and Hingham, is like a minefield. And police department, two cruisers. All these articles right here that I just very, very briefly mentioned total over $930,000, which is essentially exactly what we have cash in the bank right now from the dispensaries. So this is the whole reason why the boards, prior to my time, when Mike was here especially, voted to bring these dispensaries in is because it's saving taxpayers money, and this will clearly show we're going to save taxpayers almost $1 million. So I didn't zero out the numbers on the left-hand column, but this, obviously, if we did this, it would reduce that $5.6 million number down to 4.6. But the next step in the process will be for the town accountant to get our free cash certified. We still don't have free cash certified yet, so as soon as we get that number, then we'll know what we're working with. I'll talk to the capital planning committee and the department heads, and we'll figure out what our most important priorities are. And again, you can see down below with water, they have a number of different requests for everything from water meters and filtration and all kinds of upgrades, totaling nearly $500,000, all paid from water receipts. And I mentioned earlier with the other articles about what the sewer department is looking for. So that's where we're at on that.
Are we anticipating any more requests from some of these departments?
I don't think so.
Fire,
There was,
police?
I had a note on the bottom about two things
police
coming
ones.
soon. You can cross those off. Those are going to be addressed outside of free cash. So I don't think so. I think this is it. I should highlight that while this is a lot of money, it does include $1 million for a new track, which is requested by the Parks Department. So again, 5.6, you take out the million, I just said 4.6. Just take that million aside because that's a pretty large request, and then you're down to 3.6. So we're kind of getting more in a reasonable ballpark. But the point I was going to make is when you go through and look at these lists, there's no fluff. I mean, these are, every single one of these things is legitimate and needed. We'll just have to figure out what we can afford.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Doug. We want to continue with the FY24 budget?
Yeah, I don't really have too much to say other than that, we're still waiting for the state to come out with their state aid estimates. Again, the new governor said at the MMA conference that she's going to take every day that she has being a new governor, take the extra 5 weeks, so she's going to deliver the budget formally on March 1st. But she did commit to all the cities and towns that the local aid estimates should be done several weeks before that date, and as soon as those are known, they'll push those out. So I'm hoping within the next week or so, we'll get that information from the state, and then we can really start getting more detailed into our budget.
Did you get a feel at the MMA conference that it was going to be more funding coming from the state? Or
They were not tipping their hand.
They weren't tipping their hand at
They
all?
highlighted especially that at the time of the conference, they'd only been in office for 2 weeks, and to not expect too much, given that it's only been 2 weeks, so. No, and the revenue forecast I saw coming out of the State House was something like 1.6% going forward, so that was disappointing. So we'll see. The only other thing, kind of budget and capital project related, is, if you remember a while ago, back when our prior town accountant was here, we started an initiative to develop formal financial policies, and we got a grant from the State Department of Revenue to help us develop them. And we have a draft. We've had a draft for a while. And we, as a finance team, we started going through to try to just revise it, tweak it for what we thought was best for Rockland. Then we were going to present it to you to adopt. And with all the turnover we've had in all of our financial departments, that's been kind of put aside. But as I've been talking to our financial advisors that help us anytime we go out to bond for projects, they've indicated that it'll really be helpful for us to get those financial policies finalized and adopted by the board, because it'll help our bond rating, and especially since it was something that was noted before, so to check that off the list and have it done. So I'm working hard now with all the financial department heads. I hope either by your March 7th meeting or your March 21st meeting to have a final draft for you to approve, and I think you'll be impressed. Again, the Department of Revenue was a big help. We're just kind of tweaking it for things that we think are most reasonable for us. And that's really all I have on the financial front.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
I had a quick one. On the PFAS filter media replacement, is that just for the Myers Avenue plant?
I couldn't say.
Oh, you couldn't?
I'd have to check with the water department.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, because it's my understanding that they're going to build out the Hingham Street plant to accommodate the PFAS filters and, resin filters, which are enormous. So,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm just not sure.
I'll call Crystal.
I'm always
and see.
careful. I don't want to,
Yeah.
if I don't know, I don't want to say.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Next on the agenda, other old business not reasonably anticipated. Doug?
I have none.
Okay. Town administrators report and correspondence. Doug?
Thanks, Mike. Just a few things. This is a particularly busy week. Last night, we had a dangerous dog hearing, the first one I've done here in Rockland. That was very difficult, as they always are. Did not make any determinations or final decisions last night. I'm taking it under advisement. I'll be issuing a decision hopefully within a week or so. We obviously have the Selectmen's meeting tonight, Finance Committee tomorrow night, and Capital Planning Thursday night. So this is a busy week. Just relating to the billboard project that's been pending for a while with the State Department of Transportation, they have still not made a decision. They have still not given any indication of when they may or may not ever make a decision. And I have engaged both Representative DeCoste and Senator Keenan's office to ask them to help. And again, we're not trying to pressure them to vote the way we want to approve our preferred thing. We just want them to make a decision so we know one way or the other. And it's really just astounding that there's no legal or regulatory rules that put any kind of time frame for them making that
So
decision.
who do we go to from here? I mean, we like you said, we've engaged Senator Keenan, Representative DeCoste. We've written a letter from this board.
Yeah, I
So the
recommend that
bureaucrats
we...
and
yeah.
the DOT can just sit there and not do anything.
I think, part of it maybe could be related to the new administration, right? So maybe there's just some change in leadership. So I think at some point, we continue working with our state legislators, and then maybe we reach out to the governor's office. Because it's just, and it looks like it's not just Rockland. If you look on the website, there's other applications that have just been pending for years. So I don't know if it's a strategy where they don't want to deny something because maybe that subjects them to an appeal or something. I don't know. It's not my area of expertise, but...
So there's all these projects pending, and they're not really doing much of anything, not making decisions
with
on anything.
With
but-
some, that's right.
Yeah, okay. All right, must be nice to work for the state.
Yep. So next, we had our Recreation Community Center Public Outreach Meeting, which we were just talking about earlier. That was on last Monday, the 30th. Tiffany and Jen and I attended that meeting. I thought it was really well attended. Thought we had a lot of good input. And again, it's very preliminary, but it was a lot of engagement from folks that use the community center or are interested in the community center with talking about different ideas they had for what should or should not necessarily be included in a program for design. And then lastly, again, the fire station building project, I touched on it earlier. The ZBA, I think I mentioned, did issue their decision, so there's an appeal period now. But it was, an appropriate decision with a lot of conditions. One thing I did want to prep you all for tonight, so you weren't taken aback in 2 weeks when we have our formal presentation. We had an independent cost estimator do a detailed cost estimate, and it's come back significantly higher than we anticipated. And it's basically due to the change in construction costs, the increases that are seen across the Commonwealth, probably across the country. The cost estimator, based on recent experience with other public construction projects similar nature, they're seeing construction costs of $800 a square foot and higher. So I'm just prepping you for the fact that the number that you'll see in 2 weeks will be higher than we previously talked about before, and it's not because something's been over-designed to be, inappropriately luxurious. It's due to over $800 a square foot in construction costs, which is really just astounding. So again, I'll have that on your agenda. In 2 weeks, we'll have the architects here, we'll have the fire chief, we'll go through things in detail, we'll have detailed cost estimates, we'll have tax impacts for taxpayers with different kinds of bonding scenarios and all that. And that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. Selectmen's comments and opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of the Board of Selectmen and are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. Selectperson Childs.
I just wanted to say congratulations to the rec department for getting the cultural council grant that they got. I'm not sure if that's going to be used for what they were talking about putting shoes, because there was a shoe factory in Rockland and it's all Rockland history, all over Rockland with different artists' renderings on it, kind of like they do the lobsters in Plymouth. I think that's kind of cool. So congratulations to the rec department for that. Election season's here, and I want to encourage anybody that, rather than complaining about everything on Facebook, step up and do something about it. Especially if you see positions that are unopposed. There's one person running and it's unopposed, so it's better when 2 or more people run because we have more of a choice that way. So I highly encourage all of you Rocklandites out there to consider running for sewer commission, for our board, there's, the clerk's office, and it's also online, has the list of what you could possibly do to participate in the process and help move the town forward and make it a better place to live. So I know I have a lot of fun on this board, and these guys are, I know, despite what, the kerfuffle that's on Facebook all the time, that each of us, the white noise under everything we do is how it's going to impact residents. So there's things we can control and things we can't. So I just wanted to put that out there. That's it.
Thank you, Lori. Select Person Shorto?
I've said it before, I will say it again, please return your census. It is so important that we get an accurate count of the people in the town. When I was in town clerk, we had about 18,000 people on the rolls, but there was probably 2,000 people we hadn't accounted for. And it makes such a difference. You cannot properly plan for anything in the town if you don't have an accurate account of how many people live here. So please, do your census.
Thank you, Donna. Select Person Needham?
Actually, nothing this week.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. Vice Chairman Nyman?
I don't have anything additional tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I don't really have much. I just want to congratulate our colleague, Donna Shorto, who is now officially a published author. I was able to purchase her book from barnesandnoble.com. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, it just came in today, but I think she's the only one of us that's published up here, so that's pretty impressive, Donna, so congratulations on that. And all the illustrations as well. The story
I
and
did the illustrations
which is-
as well, yes.
Known her for years, didn't know she was that talented.
Told you I was going to.
I know you did, I know, but, so with that said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn and enter into executive session per Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, Police Superiors Union, New England Police Benevolent Association Incorporated, Local 175, and per Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, map 38, lot 131. I'll entertain a motion to enter into executive session for those reasons, not to reconvene.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, roll call vote to adjourn. Select Person Childs?
Yes.
Select Person Shorto?
Yes.
Select Person Needham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Nyman?
Yes.
And myself, we're adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great night.